Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world, and welcome to today's webcast, 5 Reasons to Choose a Managed Services Approach to Database Administration with Noel Uhana, Principal Analyst of Forrester Research, brought to you by Datavail and Information Week, and broadcast by United Business Media Limited. I'm Michael Krieger, and I'll be your moderator today. We have just a few announcements before we begin. This webcast contains audience polling. The polling questions will appear in the slide presentation window, and please complete the poll when they appear. Just click on that Submit Answer button located on the polling slide window to participate, and thanks in advance for doing so. You can also participate in our Q&A by asking questions at any time during this webcast. Just type your question into the Ask a Question text area below the video window, then click the Submit button. At this time, we also recommend you disable your pop-up blockers. The slides will advance automatically throughout the event. You may also download a copy of the slides by clicking on the Download Slide button located below the presentation window. We also have some additional assets that you'll be able to download once the event is completed. If you're experiencing any technical problems, please visit our Tech Webcast Help Guide by clicking on the Help link below the media player. In addition, you can contact our technical support helpline, which is also located in the Webcast Help Guide. Now on to the presentation, 5 Reasons to Choose a Managed Services Approach to Database Administration. Discussing today's topic is Noel Uhana. Noel is a Principal Analyst serving application development and delivery professionals. He primarily covers database management systems, infrastructure as a service, data replication and integration, data security, data management tools, and related online transaction processing issues. His current primary research focus is on customer usage experiences and broad industry trends of DBMS, IaaS, data security, enterprise data grids, outsourcing, information lifecycle management, open source databases, and other emerging database technologies. We'll also hear from Mark Perlstein. Mark is President and CEO of Datavail, a national leader in database support and professional services. For more than 2 decades, Mark has been a leader in the IT services market and brings a wealth of growth-oriented and operating experience in the services business to Datavail. Well, gentlemen, we have a lot of information to cover, not a whole lot of time to do it. So let me turn it over to Noel to begin today's presentation. Noel, go ahead.
Thanks, Michael. This is Noel Uhana, Principal Analyst with Forrester Research. And today's topic is actually a very interesting one, talking about how we are really improving database administration. How do we actually handle database administration today in the era of data explosion, in the era of new applications that we are building? So I will actually go through some of the trends, some of the survey data. We also did a joint kind of a commissioned kind of a study with Datavail on data administration. And it's interesting findings on this survey, actually, which I'll share as well. So, in terms of, interestingly, databases today are definitely lots and lots of databases today we have, right? If you look at 20, 30 years ago, we had just a few databases, actually, maybe 1 or 2 databases out there. But today, we are dealing with thousands of databases, actually. And the real reason why we have thousands of these databases is because we are building these newer applications, these mobile applications, these web applications, these cloud applications on a regular basis, right? And the more databases you have, the more challenges it becomes, right? How do you manage it? How do you administer these databases? In fact, we have done surveys over the years, and we have found that today databases have become a very critical asset to any organization, right? Where is your data stored? It's not stored in the applications. It's not stored in the middle tier, right? It's mostly in the databases, I guess, right? Or in files, right? So databases definitely hold a lot of critical data. And, traditionally we have built applications in silos. We had maybe one application and one database, right? But these silos are becoming a kind of a challenge by itself because the fact that you want to collaborate, you want to integrate this data to do better business decisions. How do you do that, I guess, right? So I guess, the database requirements have been changing. I've been covering databases at Forrester for more than 12 years. I've been in the IT industry for more than 25 years, and if you look at the trends of over the decades, things have changed a lot. I know, 15 years ago when DBAs used to work with these databases, they were dealing with very few not so critical databases. But today it's totally different. I mean, I think people are getting the DBAs are getting more calls at night and over the weekends to manage fixes. Imagine those patches, security patches you have. They can actually come up every month now, actually, right? Security patches are coming every month. How do you deploy those security patches? How do you do an upgrade to, say, an Oracle or SQL Server or Sybase, SAP or DB2? It becomes challenging, right? I mean, all these patches and upgrades and migrations going on, it becomes a big challenge itself. So I think it's time to actually look at and review your database administration strategy. Look at the things of what you guys are doing today and see what's changing and how we can really improve the efficiencies of this database administration, right? Now, that's going to be the big thing. If you don't do it today, well, you're going to be left behind because your competitor will probably go ahead and actually have better success with data management, with applications. So it's time to really act around this as well. I would say some of the top drivers and trends we see out there is definitely there's an increased volumes of these transactions, right? Organizations are dealing with millions and billions of transactions every day, right? Compared to what we had 10 years ago. This obviously creates a bigger issue in every organization. How do we deal with more efficient database platform to deliver higher throughput for these transactional systems, right? Increased data volumes is definitely a bigger concern today. I think we've done surveys on this, which shows that you double the data every year almost for critical applications. In fact, certain organizations double it every month actually. So the amount of data explosion we are having is huge, and I think as you build a bigger database, you need more administration support. Imagine managing a 50 terabyte transactional system. It requires a lot of effort actually. Trying to back it up, trying to recover, trying to tune and optimize on these environments is a bigger challenge, right? Also, you need what kind of things you need? You also need higher availability, right? With globalization, how do you ensure better availability of your systems? I know organizations kind of strive for 5 nines. They want to actually ensure availability of their systems. But, if you go in the middle of the night or a weekend, you'll see some of the banks saying that, well, our website is down right now for maintenance, actually. Well, that's not acceptable, right? I mean, you really have to narrow down all of these downtimes because it's a global kind of economy and global customer base, right? So I think organizations have to step back and say, okay, what are the ways we can actually improve the databases in their organizations to make it 24/7, more available, more secure, more integrated, right? And this is actually a bigger challenge. Drivers and trends for databases also are around newer applications that we are building, new types of social applications and all these mobile applications, which I think is really changing the way the databases are kind of managed today, right? You also have these smaller databases. Previously, we had very large databases maybe, but we also have smaller footprint databases. Maybe you may be having databases for departments or mobile platforms and others as well, right? Cost control, I think, is a bigger issue where organizations are looking for a more efficient way of controlling cost in these circumstances. They don't have a huge budget, right? I mean, maybe 10 years ago we were building these new applications. We had a lot of budget and available for us. Not anymore. Because we are building so many applications, we have lesser budget to actually share amongst those applications, right? Again, other things like building faster real-time data platforms is critical, integrated systems, and obviously unpredictable workloads. Now, unpredictable workloads is a big challenge because the fact that you may have a few users running on an application, but maybe within a month, you may have 1 million users running against your database. How do you ensure better availability, performance, scalability, all of those things. So this is definitely a bigger challenge in this environment. I talked about this a bit about this new applications we are building. What's interesting is, if you flash back 5-10 years ago, in most organizations we are building one application every few months, right? CRM and ERP applications every few months. Guess what? We're building a dozen applications every week. A dozen applications every week. This is the norm. This is the enterprise, the new enterprise. Because we are building this new social application, and there's a mobile application, and real-time applications, and departmental applications. And then when you have all of these new applications building, where is the database? Well, you've got to have a database, right? Because you're going to store some data there. You're going to collaborate this data. You need to have this data in real time and more integrated and self-service as well. So this is obviously creating a bigger issue and challenge in an organization today going forward. Let me jump in with our polling question of our first polling question of the day anyway, Noel, and that's what's the total number of databases your firm utilizes, both in production and non-production, like development or DevOps. And certainly, like yourself, I've been in IT for a while, and when I started kind of at the very, very beginning of relational databases, when developers would write to individual files for their application code. I think today, one of the reasons we see this expansion of databases is the fact that there's an easy standard interface. We have this structured query language that people are using, whether it's NoSQL or whatever it is, to access them, and it kind of pulls that out of the application or the language, the need to understand how to talk that to the individual files. So having said that, let's take a look and see what the responses are so far. I'd like to thank everyone for responding to the polling question. Fewer than 500 for most of us, but not surprising to see a number that have between 2,500 and 5,000 databases. That's just amazing when I look at it. Thank you for your responses to the poll, and with that note, I'll turn it back over to Noel. Yeah, so it's interesting, based on our survey we did with Datavail, is that the number of databases people are managing are increasing. In fact, this survey shows almost 22% of organizations have more than 5,000 databases. In fact, I came across one large bank which has got more than 65,000 databases. These are not desktop databases. These are enterprise databases worldwide, 65,000. And I asked him, actually, how do you keep a track of those databases? But I think besides keeping a track, I think they have a difficulty in managing those databases, not only from security perspective, but also from tuning and optimization and backup and recovery. It's a bigger challenge when you're dealing with so many different databases out there in an organization. But what you've seen a trend is that the number of databases are almost doubling in about 5-10 years. 5 to 10 years for organizations. So, come next 5-10 years, you're going to see a double of number of databases in your organization for sure. In fact, maybe a lot more as well, just because you're building these newer applications all the time.
And with that, here's our second polling question of the day, and I'd like you all to participate in it. What are your biggest challenges you face in administering databases? Is it delivering improved performance? Do you have data integration issues? Is it the lack of people resources to get things done? This incredible high data volume growth we're seeing, delivering higher availability, or is it just too many databases? And Noel, which is the worst to you when you talk to people that Forrester deals with? What is the main one that you're hearing more about?
Well, the main one, I guess, is performance. We have been seeing that consistently over the last decade, actually. Performance being one of the biggest challenges for organizations,
And do you think that's just due to the complexity of the applications or the virtualization impact? I mean, what impacts performance?
It's actually to do with a couple of things. One is the data volumes have grown significantly, right? When you have a larger 20 terabyte database, tuning and optimizing those databases are a bit of a challenge compared to a 1 gigabyte database, actually. So I think data volume is definitely the one big thing. But also complex applications. You're doing a lot of complexity in these applications, many table joins, and many different types of data integration, which really creates a bigger problem.
And with that, let's push the results of our second and final polling question of the day. Lack of people resources, the number one that, and I think that's probably why they're all here today, to talk about one of the ways to solve that problem. With that, I will move it on to our next slide and ask Noel to continue. Noel?
Yeah. So I guess, what's interesting is that the whole performance issue is definitely one of the big issues. We know that. Mm-hmm. And I guess lack of people resources, as you guys pointed out, is definitely a bigger issue as well. So we see that in the surveys as well. Because we have doubled the number of databases and quadrupled the number of databases, the number of DBAs hasn't grown proportionately with the number of databases we've had, right? And I think that's a big challenge. The number of databases a DBA manages today is far more than what they were a decade ago. And that actually is one big challenge itself, right? I mean, when you have more databases being managed by a single DBA, well, you got a problem actually, because if the DBA is not available, you got a problem, a critical issue there. Because what if there is a system issue? How do you manage the system issue out there, right? Performance issues and lack of resources, integrating data, all of these are critical components in an organization, I guess, and I think you really have to ensure, how do you really manage these more efficiently, right? So I guess, performance issues are definitely one of the things, as I mentioned, because of faster applications and all these larger databases you're building. If you manage a 1 terabyte database, you're probably okay with optimizing and tuning, but as soon as you go, that same database grows to 5 terabytes or 10 terabytes, you're going to run into performance issues because you need optimized disk storage. You need to have optimized SQL queries and other things as well. That actually is creating a bigger problem. As I mentioned, lack of staff resources because the ratios are a bit challenges today. Each DBA is managing more integration issues and high volume growth as well. That's actually creating a bigger issue. So what are the new database requirements today? And this is a laundry list which goes on and on. I think I just shared a couple of those. Stronger security requirements. Right? This is definitely a bigger issue today. You're dealing with PCI regulations, HIPAA regulations, and others, which are country regulations. How do you manage these databases? In fact, based on our surveys we have done, about 20% or more of your enterprise databases contain sensitive data. When you talk about sensitive data, you're talking about credit card numbers and social security numbers and what have you, right? How do you manage and best secure this to meet the compliances, but also that so no one can actually break into your organization? And, guess what? Today, there's a lot of gaps. I'm surprised to see even the Fortune 100 companies today, when I speak to them, they don't have a completely secure environment. And this is a big issue. Why is that the case? Well, the DBA resources are busy troubleshooting and optimizing these environments and making sure they are firefighting these environments, right? What about security? Well, that's a lower priority right now. Unless someone attacks us, we're not going to put it as a priority, right? So that's actually a bigger issue. I think people need to realize that they need to spend more resources today in some of these environments like security. Even performance, right? Performance is definitely a bigger issue. Higher performance, organizations, today are geared up that, hey, you need to really deliver higher performance. For example, if a customer comes onto a website and is running a web application and the response time is like 10 seconds, 5 seconds, 20 seconds, well, the customer is no longer going to be coming back to your website anymore. You got a problem, right? Because the databases are not probably optimized and tuned, right? Improved availability of the applications. As I mentioned, global applications are demanding 24/7 availability, actually. So how do you ensure not only the unplanned outages, but also the planned outages? In fact, if you look at 5 nines today, this is all the unplanned outages. What about planned outages? I need to change those applications. I need to really maintain the hardware, right? On-demand scalability is a bigger issue. Backups of Tier 2 and Tier 3. Tier 2 and Tier 3. This is something interesting. No, traditionally we have backed up Tier 1 applications all the time. What about Tier 2, Tier 3 applications? And this is not so mission critical, but still critical for the business to function. And maybe it's internally for a department or something. And we have started to see a bigger requirement emerge in the Tier 2 and Tier 3 for backups and recovery, for optimization and all these things. And where are the DBAs going to really support these environments, right? Better SLAs. This is actually, again, a bigger challenge by itself. How do you improve SLAs? And I think every organization struggles with improving SLAs, faster provisioning, and all the good stuff. So, these are the new requirements, and the list goes on and on and on. And if you look at 5 years ago, this list was a very small list of things which the DBA organization used to focus on. Well, today this list has grown. And why is that the case? Because we haven't yet put a thoughts and focus on database administration over the last many years. So what are your choices to lower your database administration cost? Well, you got to stop building new applications, which I don't think is an option. If you stop building applications today, then you can stop building new databases, I guess, right? And then the DBAs are happy because you don't really have to run around and start to support that. Stop growing your databases, which I think is not an option as well, because you actually are increasing your databases unless you start looking at archiving, which is very complex, or splitting the database into many different components, which again requires a lot of hard work to do that actually. And also buying more expensive database tools, right? You can buy database tools out there, but they are very, very expensive. They charge by the CPU. They charge by the core. It can really become very expensive. Or maybe moving to open source databases. Well, migrations are not straightforward. Moving from a commercial product to an open source is not straightforward. I've seen customers struggle with that. Or hire DBAs, which I think is probably the best option, but it's obviously a bit of a cost involved in that, actually doing that, right? So of all of the options here of administration and management, what is the way of controlling the cost of the database administration? I believe that outsourcing database administration offers these new possibilities of lowering your administration cost. And how do we do that, I guess, right? Well, outsourcing actually is pretty cool, actually, because they have outsourcing vendor actually dealing with all of these different databases for different companies. So they have a team of maybe tens and hundreds of DBAs who are very specialized in databases, whether it's Oracle, SQL Server, DB2, SAP, Sybase, or NoSQL databases, and what have you. And these actually can be shared resources, and they are monitoring 24/7. They're also adding additional functionality. Could be backup and recovery and tuning and optimization, migrations and upgrades, right? This actually really helps you a lot, right? Because you may only have a very few number of DBAs. You may only have, say, 2 DBAs or 5 DBAs, but I have 1,000 databases. How do you manage those, right? So with database, this outsourcing of this database administration, you can actually offshore or outsource these functions of databases, right, to really do a better job in, say, proactively monitoring these systems. So they have round-the-clock support for these applications and databases in question, which really is helpful. So what are the things you can do actually with this, with this database administration outsourcing? Well, you can do the installations, you can do the upgrades, you can do migrations, you can do troubleshooting. The list goes on and on and on. So it really helps you supplement existing DBA staff. So I think DBA should welcome this outsourcing database administration to really help them to actually push away some of these tasks which they're doing on a regular basis, things like backup and recovery and troubleshooting and some of these monitoring 24/7. Imagine, which is difficult to do, to these outsourcing providers, which really helps a lot. And why would you want to do that actually? Well, you want to really do that because you can actually then focus on this new generation of these applications, which I talked about, these new web applications, the cloud application, the web application, called the mobile application you're building, right? And I think more important is also focusing on things like security frameworks, thinking about these high availability environments as well. So you really have all of these benefits you can actually achieve with outsourcing, right? I guess, we did a survey to find out about, what are things people are doing with the benefits of outsourcing. I think the benefits are huge, right? It will actually vary depending on the type of organizations. But but I would say that most organizations in our survey which we did, more than 68% of organizations today mentioned lowering administration cost is one of the real reason why people are kind of looking at outsourcing databases. Second to being the quality of database service, right? Now, which is interesting, how would the quality of database administration improve by outsourcing database administration? Well, couple of points. One is the fact that most organizations don't have a database administration formal strategy, right? They have a data strategy, but they don't really have database strategy per se. And what it means is that they are doing firefighting. They are not really doing new next generation strategy focusing on this, right? Which means that if you really want to formalize this whole administration, like having a formalized program for backup and recovery and optimization and global database support, how do you do that, I guess, right? They don't really have a strategy in place. Now, outsourcing helps you in that regard because they already have worked with other customers, right? That's one of the good things about outsourcing, because they already have a blueprint. They have a framework established to help customers. They can help the things they have learned from one customer and share it with other customers, right? That's really cool, actually. And actually can build a better framework about things, how you can improve administration, those backup and recovery, the installations, upgrades, migrations, all of this can be improved a lot more. So what we've seen, people who do outsourcing have mentioned cost, number one, as I mentioned. Number two being the quality of services, which I think is about 56% of organizations mentioned. That actually is pretty cool, actually. Also, it has helped focus on the business rather than technology issues, which I think is really, again, another issue where most organizations are struggling with these day-to-day database activities, right? But can you really focus on business issues rather than dealing with technology issues, right? This is really the real value which comes in an organization, right? The fact that you can actually focus on things like SLAs, you can focus on security, you can focus on integration, you can focus on collaboration. So this is where the DBAs will actually focus on improve the database things as well. So this actually kind of gives you kind of a summary of those top benefits. As I mentioned, you got lower cost, you got improving quality, you got complement existing staff, improving SLAs. This is actually another huge thing. Because the fact that you're proactively monitoring these databases, the SLAs have improved. In fact, I think more than some 50% of organizations have mentioned improving the SLAs when they outsource databases. Now, this is cool. And the real reason is why, because the fact that you have these organizations, these outsourcing vendors actually looking at monitoring these environments and looking for gaps, looking for issues all the time, which may be difficult for doing in a typical organization, right? And this comes back to the point that most organizations actually have seen a significant improvement in SLAs. In fact, in the survey we did, I think more than 76% combined together have seen some improvement, maybe either slight improvement or a significant improvement in the SLAs when they're outsourcing database administration. Now, so what are the plans? This is a survey we did actually, and we asked them, what are the plans with outsourcing your database administration in the future as compared to today? What are things changing, right? Now, what's interesting is that most organizations are improving the focus on database administration, right? And I think they want to really improve that. They want to increase the outsourcing of DBA activities. 44% of organizations we have surveyed are claiming that they're going to increase the usage of the outsourcing of database administration. Now this doesn't mean that they're going to reduce their staff internally with the number of DBAs they have, but it's more about complementing, supplementing the existing staff to do more, right? More applications, more databases today, because DBAs are already kind of working 24/7, I guess, in most of these environments, right? So how do you actually supplement this to really improve the quality of service for databases, right? So this is really the big focus where they're increasing the usage of outsourcing database administration. I guess, the recommendations, I guess, we have for looking at outsourcing database administration is that Outsourcing has actually many business and technology benefits that can help all organizations, as I mentioned, right? And the fact that, you're lowering your cost, you're improving the quality of services, you're ensuring the availability of your databases more than previously done. An example is, as I mentioned, SLAs, right? This really helps a lot, actually. A small difference could make a big difference, a big impact to an organization. If you have some of these things by monitoring, some of these things being closely monitored, things like critical databases, right? But not necessarily just Tier 1 application as well, or databases, but Tier 2 applications as well could really help in these environments. Look at vendors offering expertise and focus and tasks they can help with, right? And automation and potential cost saving, right? If you're looking for vendors for outsourcing database administration, look at what the expertise they have. What are the focus areas? What are the tasks they can help with? Do they offer a complete list of things they can offer for outsourcing, or just a partial list of things, right? As I mentioned. Look at also the automation they bring in, right? I think automation is a big factor where how much they can improve not only the processes but also the whole functioning of your database administration, right? And then potential cost savings, right? I mean, can I really improve my bottom line in terms of my cost savings? Can I really lower my database administration, my IT cost, by including having this outsourcing database administration, right? That's actually being a focus. Now, we have seen this in most organizations where people have saved money. Typically, you would save 20% or more when you're outsourcing database administration, 20% or more. I know in certain organizations it's a lot higher. Could be 40%, 50%. But 20% or more could be saved if you have a right strategy on outsourcing database administration. So that's huge savings for IT organizations out there, and especially when you're building these newer databases and applications. Start with a fewer databases and grow over time. You don't really have to, I got these 500 databases, I need to push out into outsourcing. Maybe not, no. Maybe start with 20%, 10% of these databases. See how that goes. See if you can save money. See if you can see improving your quality of services and maybe even automate some of these processes as well. And then actually grow. I mean, you can actually expand your focus to those tens and hundreds of databases and even thousands of databases. I know I ran into an organization which I think is outsourcing almost like 60% of their databases, which run into a few thousands actually. I think more than 4,000 databases out there. And that's huge. And these are some of the critical databases they're running for some financial services organizations. So that's definitely a big focus, right? Keep security and SLAs in mind when outsourcing. You want to make sure that these databases which you're outsourcing for administration, make sure they have already some security practice enabled. It's better to have that. I'm sure the outsourcing vendor can help you improve security as well, but make sure that there is something already, kind of a basic database security already built in to this environment. And then also look at what is the outsourcing vendor's capabilities when it comes to security. What kind of things they can improve in security? What are the tools they offer? What are things they do from a security perspective? Do they have their DBAs that are managing remotely clarified or have clearance to do certain government or some certain elements of environments? Or do they have secure platforms and secure data centers in place? I mean, those things you need to ask the outsourcing vendor as well. And SLAs as well, can really improve my SLAs. I think that's important as well. No, you shouldn't be having outsourcing database administration where your SLAs are starting to decline, actually, right? You want to make sure your SLAs actually are the same or they're improving when they're outsourcing these administration, right? And I think enterprises that invest in outsourcing database administration are more likely to respond quickly to business needs and competitive threats and save money and grow faster. I guess, I mean, what we've seen is organizations who are doing this today are better equipped to deal with these newer next generation applications they are supporting, like social applications, mobile applications, web applications. How can we manage these and address these more quickly enough, but also more efficiently as well, right? So we've seen that. And once you have these platforms, I think you really can actually improve your enterprise revenue and grow faster as well, which I think really is definitely beneficial to every organization. Okay, with that, I'd like to thank you and hand over to Michael.
And now we'll turn it over to Mark. Thank you so much, Noel. Mark, go ahead.
Thanks, Noel, and hi, everybody. So we thought it was helpful at this point to dig into sort of an operationalized view of database management. And keeping in line with the tone of today's webinar, this is still less about a technical discussion and more about processes and approaches that help us bring, efficiency and, in particular, capacity planning to the database management function. In our polling question earlier in the webinar, about half the people, about 50%, said that lack of resources is one of the largest challenges that you're facing. And I will echo that sort of sentiment from what we see from our customers out there. In general, we find that customers need about double the DBA capacity they currently have to really, truly effectively meet demand and manage the stresses inside of an environment. But the problem is, as everybody on this call I'm sure is well aware, is that generally budgets are very constrained, and given the current cost profiles inside an operating environment, the ability to just double capacity just simply is not a realistic opportunity. And so ultimately, most organizations end up with some combination of either having a stressful operating environment or, as we see very often, high DBA turnover. And so if we take a very simplistic view of the way DBA tasks break down into two large categories, with the first category being that what we call Tier 3 layer or engineering and architectural activity. And generally we see that taking up about 20 to 25% of the overall tasks of database administration, while the Tier 2 operational DBA layer consumes about 75 to 80% of the tasks. And so we have a mismatch here generally between what DBAs inside of an enterprise do and what they want to do. Because architecture, engineering, and very critically integration into your application teams, those are the things that you want to focus on. Those are the things that enterprises want their DBAs focused on. That occurs during business hours, and it is inherently unstructured communication. And the reason why a lot of outsourcing engagements fail, not just in database administration, but across the entire IT portfolio, but very specifically within databases, because we try to take what are naturally unstructured tasks that require a free-flowing, tight communication, and we try to put them a long distance away from where that communication needs to occur. The other issue is that Tier 3 engineering and architectural work is not really inherently a 24/7 operative function. We have the complete opposite set of realities when we look to the Tier 2 layer, which is really consumed mostly by what we'll call production support. While Tier 3 is not necessarily a requirement to execute at all hours, the operational layer does have a requirement to execute at all hours. And if an enterprise has not built that operational layer, who's left to do it? But the Tier 3 DBAs who really want to start working or continue working on higher level tasks. In the operational layer, again compared to the engineering and architectural layer, that layer is much more about process and structured communication, as opposed to the Tier 3 layer, which is really, again, about unstructured communication. And the Tier 2 layer is inherently 24/7. So you take those realities, and now you overlay those realities with what an enterprise is facing, probably being close to half of the capacity that they need. And your Tier 3 DBAs, the people that want to be doing and can do the higher level work, end up doing Tier 2 work. It leads to a high degree of job satisfaction and high turnover. And what makes the situation even more difficult for the enterprises is that there's a shortage of DBAs out there. So there are plenty of job opportunities for DBAs to go to if they feel they're being stressed inside of an operation. the reality is that a strong operational layer, a strong Tier 2 layer, actually helps make recruiting and retention of enterprise DBAs easier and more reliable. And because the operational outsourcing mechanism lowers your costs by, well, we see 25 to 60% in that layer, it eases budgetary pressures and constraints and allows the enterprise to begin to actually structure a database capacity that could meet database demand. So my next slide talks about perception versus reality. Those who know me know that I'm generally not afraid to talk about the question that everybody's afraid to talk about. And so when we talk about outsourcing, the first thing that comes to everybody's mind is, if you're inside of an enterprise, I'm going to lose my job, and over my dead body am I going to support it? So DBAs will inevitably be fearful of adding database managed services to their team. And the fear is based probably on prior experiences of bad delivery and poor quality, a bad experience of some sort, fear of loss of control. Those are all very present emotions when outsourcing is being considered. And the truth is, it's not just the DBAs. The managers of the DBA functions and the IT directors also have that same fear. But what we'd like to do is sort of redefine outsourcing and have it be thought more of as an assistance, an augmentation, and an addition to what an existing operation needs to do and is doing in the database function, as opposed to a replacement. And the reality is, we see the perception inevitably changes because trust is everything in life. And so as trust is built and positive experiences replace the perception, all of a sudden, the DBAs that were fearful of us on our way in become our most ardent supporters later. This is not just true of Datavail. This is true of anybody executing and delivering the database function in the database outsourcing pure play scenario, because all of a sudden those enterprise DBAs on site at a client are able to get to all of those things that before they weren't able to get to, and a good night's sleep winds up being more the reality and the norm as opposed to the exception, because you're not being awakened at all hours of the night, and you're more refreshed and able to be targeted and strategic inside your operations and enterprises. And so fear is always out there with this. We see time and again that if we sort of do a crawl, walk, run strategy, the database outsourcer gets started, we build trust, and ultimately those DBAs that are at our clients wind up being much happier and actually much more productive people for the enterprises who they work for. A little bit of a commercial on us. We've got over 350 DBAs. We have over 300 customers. We run a truly classic, real managed services operation, 3 shifts, 24/7, staffed by live DBAs. It's an onshore, offshore model, so we're able to bring both close to customer services as well as offshore labor arbitrage and blend it together with many levers to pull and push to create the right solution for our customers. We work in Oracle, Oracle EBS, Microsoft SQL Server, MySQL, both flavors of DB2 and MongoDB growing, as well as SharePoint, which is not on here, but another practice that we have. We augment your team. You can use fractional resources with us. You can actually achieve 24/7 with as little as 20 hours of coverage, and you look at that quote up in the upper left-hand corner there. This is not sort of alerting and waking people up for 24/7. This is real live DBA staffed in a full 3-shift model across a 24/7 shift coverage with as little as what we call half a shift or half a load of a DBA. And so, pleasure to talk to everybody today. We're happy to take questions, and we'll turn it over to that.
Thank you very much for that. And before we get to our question and answers, I'd like to have you all fill out the feedback form that's just opened on your computer. To complete the form, please press the Submit Answer button at the bottom of the page. Thanks in advance for filling out the feedback form. Your participation in this survey allows us to better serve you. So now let's get on to the question and answer portion of our event. As a reminder, to participate in the Q&A, just type your question into the text box located below the media player, then click the Submit Question button. we certainly can't answer your question until you've submitted it. So please go ahead and do that. So let me start off, Noel, with a question for you. This question comes from Alex, who asks, what kind of companies responded to the Forrester survey?
Well, the type of companies, I guess, were all across the different vertical industries, from healthcare to the retailers to the financial services, the banks, and to insurance companies. Sort of the broad coverage across all of these vertical industries, including obviously financial services and insurance, which are obviously one of the top users of Outsourcing Database Administration. But it's been broad. It's been pretty broad, you know. So.
Were they mostly enterprise-sized customers, or was it a broad range of sizes? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that's a good question, actually. You know, and these are enterprise customers actually who are actually focusing. So these are more than 1,000 or more employees in this mix. So the companies which we surveyed was, number one, they had more than 1,000 employees, number one. Number two is that they were actually outsourcing some or all of their databases today in the enterprise. So they were already outsourcing, and we wanted to know the experiences of what they found outsourcing to be. Was it valuable to them? Was it not so valuable? So we wanted to find their experience as well. But these are fairly large companies which we spoke to.
Okay, terrific. Thanks. Keep your questions coming. This one from Carlos. And Mark, Carlos says, we outsource most of our infrastructure to a large global company with 3 letters, but I don't think we're getting much attention in the database area. What should we do?
So we see this problem all the time. Often the database function is included inside a broad-based general infrastructure outsourcing strategy. We see a lot of large outsourcers come in and obviously compete for that business and win it. And then ultimately, within the database stack itself, within that tower of service, most of the large outsourcers, their smallest and least invested in service that they have is often the database function, the database service. And while they might call it a managed service, it often is actually not a managed service. The way that, and we've had many customers face this problem, and some customers have been successful in dealing with it, and some customers, while they've wanted to, have been unsuccessful dealing with it. And it has to do with the level of flexibility that was built into the contractual language and agreements that were made at the time the deal was signed, and how frustrating the experience actually is. If that frustration has risen up the ranks to those people that could actually affect what is happening with that large outsourcer. So we have actually had clients successfully peel out the database function from a larger outsourcing contract, but it requires multiple people be involved in the organization, and it requires that support for that decision has been built probably at multiple levels. When that situation arises, you probably have a little bit longer than you have a shorter time span to execute on it, but you can be successful with it, but it will take some work internally. Our recommendation is to not include the database function in a broad-based infrastructure outsourcing strategy. Try to get it peeled out, or if you're going to include it, give yourself the contractual flexibility to exit if it's not working. And usually at the time of negotiation, the larger outsourcers are more inclined to be flexible than after you've signed the paper.
Okay, thanks for that, and thanks for submitting that question. Keep them coming. We'll try to get as many of them that we can in the time remaining. Noel, this question comes to you from Sally, who asks, is outsourcing database administration also applicable to our legacy database environment?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is not just for the newer next-generation databases, but also legacy databases, whether you're running ZOS on the mainframe or vSAM or VMS. I know it could be DB2 ZOS, it could be IMS, it could be Database. I mean, all these databases still require support. In fact, there are more than 11,000 customers worldwide which are running these databases on mainframes today. And they struggle quite a lot actually with staffing issues. I know, because they don't have a lot of staff in mainframe side of the house, and we're not really, having people graduate out of high school or colleges who actually are learning mainframes actually anymore, right? So we got a gap in the industry, and how do you fill the gap actually? Obviously, outsourcing is a better way of doing this, where you can actually outsource your administration to these companies who actually have skills in the administration of ZOS and DB2 or IMS or Arabas or VMS, which actually can really help. Because from what you've seen in the trend is that no one actually is pulling the plug on these environments because they are still mission critical for the organizations to operate. And I think next 5-10 years you're going to still see those applications still running on these mainframes.
Terrific. Thanks for that. Keep the questions coming. Mark, this one comes from Kerry, who wants to know what's the typical cost savings one can achieve with outsourcing our database administration. Where's the beef?
Yeah, so we get this question all the time, as you would imagine. And the reality is the larger the load of database effort that is being delivered, the greater the opportunity there is and exists for cost savings. So at sort of the lower level of effort, probably we're talking 25 to 30% savings. And as we head up towards 1 to more than 2 DBAs worth of level of effort in an outsourcing engagement, and heading up over that, we can literally get to 60% cost savings because of the leverage that is available to us as a service provider. So I would generally peg the range of 25 to 60%, with most of our customers seeing 40 to 50% savings when you really look at existing cost of people internally in an enterprise versus what we can do for somebody in a service capacity.
Terrific. Thanks for that. Here's one from Robert, who works for a company with 3 different letters than the one we were referring to. He asks, we have, and Noel, this is directed to you, we have many production databases supporting our manufacturing applications. These databases are seemingly fine until they break. For example, we just had one grow too large, and it was down for 2 days. So what's the best way to justify DBA outsourcing when all seems well?
Well, I guess all things are not seeming well here.
But yeah, it was fine until it wasn't.
I guess, the fact is that SLAs matter, I think, a lot in organizations. And I think you have to look at historical SLAs, how much SLAs have improved or declined over the last year. And you got to see those things. And if there is any indication of SLAs dropping, that's a very good sign that you need to start looking at outsourcing your database administration, first of all, because the fact that you have decline in your SLAs, you shouldn't be declining. I think that would be a starting point, and I think management would love to see that, actually. If you can see a SLA chart which shows you things which have declined, and I think that actually could justify your outsourcing your database administration, just because the fact that you need to improve SLAs, not decline those. But also look at the cost also, right? If you look at the total cost, in terms of the number of tools you're spending, the number of databases you're spending, which I think is also an important factor. So the fact that you can actually improve the cost as well, I think the management would love to hear about those things as well, as to how you can actually improve the cost of administration, of database administration, right? I think those are. So I think it's SLAs and definitely the cost factors which actually can really improve. But also, as I mentioned earlier on, is also the gaps and the issues. Proactively monitoring and managing these environments can actually unearth or kind of find out those gaps and issues which organizations have in the administration. So until you don't really have those issues, things like those failures, people can't really justify it. And I think that's a good point, actually. And we have seen that where organizations who struggle with SLAs are more likely to succeed in getting outsourcing administration. But that's one side of the coin. The second coin, obviously, is the cost issue, as I mentioned, where you can actually save money, go to the management and say that, hey, we can really save you money, actually, with all this administration efforts actually going on. We are really actually, instead of hiring you can't really double the number of DBAs in an organization so quickly, but actually you can have a supplementary kind of a force, task force or a people force to actually help you with administration,
Great, thanks. Mark, did you have something to add to that?
Yeah, so I would say, well, if everything is running perfectly fine and there's no need for additional capacity, then the justification for a database outsource managed services solution may actually, in that particular case, not be the highest priority. But what I would say is that we generally find that to be a sort of false sense of comfort, because the big question is, what is not getting done that otherwise could or needs to get done? So even though the database itself operatively is stable, there, again, it's that 25 to 75 split between the high-level architectural and engineering functions and the production support functions. So what if we could take the production support load off of the existing team? What else would get freed up so that more valuable work could get executed and potentially avoid adding a new hire, but rather give refreshed energy and availability of the people who are already there? And so oftentimes that's the question on the table, and I'd have to talk more specifically with the person who asked the question to see if that's sort of an appropriate avenue for discussion. But generally speaking, we find our clients need to do more in the database space than they have DBAs to do the work.
Thanks for that. Here's a question from Tan, and Mark Tan wants to know, how do we help our DBAs feel comfortable with working with an outsourcing vendor?
Yeah, and so, look, the key in all of this is trust and relationship building, and I would say there's two levers, two mechanisms that need to be applied here. First and foremost, someone inside the organization needs to be an advocate and a leader for getting it done. Generally, that's either the database manager or a lead DBA or someone in the IT function that says this would be good to look at, and he or she gathers their team together and says, we're going to look at this together, but we need to see if we can give ourselves more efficiency and more capability. The second piece to it, and we ask this all the time, is to include those very DBAs in the process of dialoguing with us through the discovery process of learning about clients. It's amazing what happens when people get face-to-face and peers start talking to each other. Fear goes away, trust gets built, and a path can often move forward.
Terrific. Thank you for that, Mark. We have time for one final question, but if you submit questions and we don't have time for them, we can get you a written response after the event, so don't hesitate to keep the questions coming. This final one from Grover for you, Noel, who wants to know, how do organizations improve SLAs when outsourcing their databases?
Yeah, no, that's an important question, I guess, right? SLAs are important, I guess. I think most enterprises strive on achieving 5 nines, but they obviously run into issues because they have the lack of skills, and they have hardware issues, they got human errors, you got platform complexity. So outsourcing actually can really improve by as I mentioned, automating these processes and proactively monitoring these systems and applications and databases, and improving areas which minimizes the critical outages. So you can have the outsourcing vendor actually look at the gaps and the issues and kind of minimize and improve the areas where it needs more efficiencies as well. So we've seen, as I mentioned in a survey, 76% of the database companies which we spoke to have actually have said that they have improved SLAs when they have outsourced their database administration.
Okay, thanks for that. And with that, we have run out of time. I want to thank all of you for attendance. For more information related to today's webcast, please visit any of those resource links that you saw open before you. And within the next 24 hours, you will receive a personalized follow-up email with details and a link to today's presentation on demand. Additionally, you can view today's event on demand by visiting www.netseminar.com. Thanks for attending today's webcast, 5 Reasons to Choose a Managed Services Approach to Database Administration, with Noel Johanna, Principal Analyst, Forrester Research, brought to you by Datavail and Information Week. This webinar is copyright 2014 by United Business Media, LLC. The presentation materials are owned by or copyrighted, if that's the case, by Datavail and Information Week, who are solely responsible for its content, and the individual speakers who are solely responsible for their content and their opinions. On behalf of our guests, Noel Johanna and Mark Pearlstein, I am Michael Krieger. Thanks for your time, and have a great day.